Welcome to the Holy Post. Fox News has fired its most popular host. Does this signal a change in the cable news network? Then an online chatbot says that Christianity gives it hope. Are we witnessing the first ever AI convert? Then there are more news stories about innocent people being shot by fearful gun owners who feel threatened by their presence. Is this the inevitable outcome of America's addiction to fear and idolatry of guns? Then I talk with one of our favorite guests, Derwin Gray, who's back to ask a question that he's been sitting on for 20 years. Why isn't the civil rights movement considered a Christian revival? He talks with me about the history of revivals in America and how our economic and political idols have prevented us from truly embracing the messianic mandate of Jesus. All of that, plus a Florida shark gets hammered on spring break. As always, we have loads of great content beyond just today's episode. A new Holy Post Extra interview is out with singer-songwriter Ross King. We talk about his new song and why the contemporary Christian music industry doesn't seem to produce much prophetic music anymore. That's available to everybody right now on our YouTube channel. But exclusively for Holy Post supporters is a new edition of the Holy Post Office, where you, our listeners, have sent in questions and then voted on which one you most want us to answer. Today, Phil, Caitlin, and I each answer the question, when was the last time you changed your mind about a long-held belief, and what was that belief? It's a great conversation, so don't miss it. And one more thing, I'm happy to announce a new live stream event that we're calling To Hell with Skye. Some of you know that I write a daily devotional for people who hate daily devotionals called With God Daily, and I recently wrapped up a month-long series in that devotional about the doctrine of hell. It provoked so many responses that we've decided to host a live stream where you can ask me anything you want about the topic. It's going to be on the night of Thursday, May 4th, and it will be exclusively for Holy Post supporters or subscribers to With God Daily. To find out more about all of this bonus content, go to holypost.com and click the Support Us link at the top of the page or sign up for our brand new free email newsletter. Okay, let's jump into episode 562.
Hey there, welcome back to the Holy Post Podcast. This is Phil Vischer. I am here with Skye Jitani. Hi, Skye.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, Skye is dialing in once again from the White Death Star, where two stormtroopers are protecting his head from being smashed by lines of... Are those your own books?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are extra copies of my own books.
I thought so. Being smashed by his own prolific output. That's the metaphor. It's a metaphor. And Kaylin Shess. Hi, Kaylin.
Hi, Phil.
Who is clearly, you have no stormtroopers holding back the books from overtaking.
It wouldn't be very
head.
on brand for me.
I guess not.
No.
You don't know you're a success until you have your own stormtroopers, Caitlin.
Oh, okay. I should probably...
It's like having your own minions.
I should probably learn what stormtroopers are and do before I have miniature stormtroopers in my office.
Yeah. There's the other half of our audience that just went, oy vey! And now it's time for the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post.
And sometimes Caitlin.
This episode of the Holy Post is sponsored by Faithful Counseling. Life is not easy. Relationships are hard. Parenting is hard. Being the child of parents is hard. I've found a trained therapist can be a wonderful sounding board for working through the ups and downs of living in a fallen world as fallen people. Faithful Counseling is a Christian counseling service with more than 3,000 licensed therapists across all 50 states, with access by video or phone sessions or even chat and text, with expertise in depression, stress, anxiety, trauma, family conflicts, and more. It's more affordable than traditional counseling, and financial aid is available for those who qualify. We all need to talk to someone sometime, and Faithful Counseling can help. Continue growing into the best version of yourself. Visit faithfulcounseling.com/holypost and get the professional, faith-based counseling that you need. They've even got a special offer for our listeners. Right now, you can get 10% off your first month at faithfulcounseling.com/holypost. Thanks again to Faithful Counseling for sponsoring this episode. We're back. Skye's got the right mic. Caitlin's unmuted. We might be ready to do a podcast. We don't know. But crazy things are happening in the world because like just a couple hours before we're recording, Tucker Carlson fired from Fox News. And same day, Don Lemon fired from CNN. Oh my gosh, what's going on? These are some of the most unbiased journalists working today. If they can't make it, what does it say for the rest of us? Skye has been following this very closely on Twitter. He says, Skye,
I think we should fire Caitlin from the Holy Post.
Whoa.
I'm just kidding. It seems to be all the cool kids are doing it today.
Did you see, this went viral over the weekend, Tucker Carlson's rant against the left, and that the left had now moved into full-on, the only way to describe it was just evil, that you can't reason with them. Yeah, it was at some sort of conservative thingy, confab, and he just went, and it wasn't on TV, it was at a conference, but it was a long, like Bill Maher style, like 5-minute rant about how what we're dealing with now for the first time in American history is the other side is bent on destruction and can only be described as just evil.
So my question is, what do you think happens next with him? I mean, he's been on this trajectory for a while, kind of the left is evil, but I see a couple of options. Does he land at a different network, like a more far-right OANN or Newsmax kind of network, or Daily Caller?
Yeah.
Does he run for political office?
Oh, heaven help us.
Does he sue Fox News perhaps in some kind of, because he hasn't said, at least at the time of this recording, he hasn't said anything publicly. Maybe he's not happy with what happened. Or does he, burst into a million cockroaches like that guy from Men in Black, where you find out he's actually just some kind of alien infestation that's been masquerading as a
wearing
man.
a skin suit.
No.
Right. That's could be. That's a viable option, Caitlin. You're so quick to dismiss.
Not. He is a human person. I'm just not over the fact that Skye just compared me to Tucker Carlson.
I did not compare you to Tucker Carlson. I would never do such a thing.
And Caitlin, would Phil ever do that? Would Phil ever compare you to Tucker?
No, I don't believe he would.
Not in 1,000 years. See, there you go. I win. Why? What's your best guess from the info we have today as to why he is suddenly out? They were promoting a guest he was going to have like tonight or tomorrow night, and then boom, he's out.
I've seen almost no analysis on this, and by the time our show comes out on Wednesday, this could sound really stupid. So I'm hesitant to. Oh, great!
No, because you're going to sound so prescient when you're exactly right. It will just build your legend, the legend of Skye Jitani.
One of his former producers is suing Fox News. She's the woman who alleges that Fox News was trying to get her to lie for the Dominion lawsuit. But it turns out her lawsuit includes a bunch of other accusations against Tucker Carlson and his team around misogyny and sexism and abuse and all kinds of stuff. So it feels a little bit like what they did to, what was his name? Bill
O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly, where he got pushed out from that same time slot. He was like their number one guy at 8:00 at night. They pushed him out because of accusations that came out from some female producers, I think, on his program. And it sounds like there's a similar toxicity going on with Tucker Carlson's program. And you add that all up in the $700 and some million lawsuit settlement they had last week, and maybe they just made the decision that he's more of a liability than an asset at this time, and they've been able to switch out that 8:00 time slot before with a new host and done just as well. So thank you very much. There's the door. We'll find someone else to tell the audience what they want to hear.
Yeah, so their view might be, it wasn't you that was so popular, it's that time slot that's so popular.
Well, it makes you wonder if someone else does jump in there, do they end up doing the same thing that O'Reilly did and that Carlson did, which is eventually morph into whatever the audience really wants them to be?
It's like the time slot and the audience. I've been doing a lot of Play-Doh with my 3-year-old grandson, and you have all those little shapes that you take the Play-Doh and you squish it into, and then the Play-Doh becomes what the shape demands. And
That's the whole point of Plato.
Talent. Yes, I know. I'm not saying anything revolutionary about Plato, Skye. I'm drawing an analogy to a cable news talking head commentary, and that the audience and the slot has an expectation that conforms the talent, or the talent must, walk away and reject it. The problem is, here's my question. Is it impossible to be popular in cable news on either side and actually be a kind person? Because everyone's getting tossed out the door either for misogyny or belittling crew. This is the second CNN guy that's been tossed out in the last year. And like Fox News, you just kind of assume all of them are jerks behind closed doors, and you're more likely to be true than not true.
Have we really tried the alternative, though? Has anyone put a super nice person in at a primetime slot on a cable news network to see if it works?
It's not entertaining, Skye.
Yeah.
We want to be entertained. Are you not entertained? We want circuses. We don't want Mr. Rogers reading us the news.
I also feel like there's
Caitlin?
just some selection bias where, like, to get to the point where you would be on a national cable show, even if you started as a very nice person, the kinds of things you would need to do to get there would probably be things that would require that you weren't a very nice person to people. And along the way, by the time you got there, even though they weren't as public before that, or it wasn't as big a deal, if they were doing things along the way to get them to that high of a place, they were already in positions where probably people were sort of treating them like special golden child kind of thing, especially some of the younger ones. And so I think being treated like that and being in environments where people talk to you and do those kinds of things to you, I just feel like that will form you into the kind of person that's not a very nice person. And then, as you said, we don't want very nice people when we're looking for people to tell us why we're all right and the other side is literally evil.
Yeah, right. That reminds me, Skye, I think we need to stop treating Caitlin like she's the special golden child.
Oh my God.
Because we're conforming her character into a monster. We're going to make the next Tucker Carlson out of Caitlin.
Okay, so what is your plan to make sure I'm not formed in those ways?
I don't know.
Just wanton meanness?
I haven't cooked it up quite yet.
You let me know when you figure out the spiritual formation I need.
I'll let you. Yes. This is our spiritual formation. The spiritual formation of Caitlin Chess is my new indie film coming from.
You make it sound like she's turning into some kind of diva.
Yeah.
A podcast diva, Caitlin Chess.
Well, I'm not saying she isn't. Okay. Does it mean anything? Does it change anything? Does it improve anything? I saw on Twitter one of the more prominent, louder voices of Christian nationalism saying, good for him to be out of there because Fox News is the regime and now he's free. Now he's free from the regime that is Fox News.
It's actually been one of the more entertaining things to see on Twitter today are all the conspiracy theories that are coming out and all the people who are just the knives are out for Fox News.
Yeah.
Like they are the enemy. It was confirmed back in 2020 when they were the first network to call the election for Biden that got them into all this trouble. So a lot of people are just going, Fox News is gone. They're the man. They're the deep state. And this whole persecution narrative that is being woven now around Tucker Carlson, like he is some kind of victim and a martyr in all of this. It's just amazing.
It's so wild because I've heard a lot of people say, part of the reason that Fox News might be willing, it might be sparked by some specific thing, but they're more willing to let him go after what came out during the Dominion case in terms of him not being on the side of the super far right people questioning the election. Like he's already kind of displayed his willingness to be used by whoever will pay him. So the fact that you would turn him into this martyr of being too right for Fox News is just bizarre.
So you're saying if we paid Tucker Carlson, then we could conform him to our values?
Honestly,
the values of goodness and truth and light.
Well, do you have that kind of money?
That would be such an interesting public relations coup.
Yeah.
The reformation of Tucker Carlson, brought to you by the Holy Post, that I bet we could fund it. I bet we could find donors who would underwrite it.
I don't know that we want that, but...
Okay. So, okay. So it's maybe we could just say opinion news on cable news channels should be less important. And let's just put it at like 1 p.m. in the afternoon and just say you can't do it in prime time anymore. You can't do it in a slot where anyone would watch.
Which it's not really important for like vast generational groups. I mean, like, I think this matters for, you know, some older white people who watch Fox News, but like none of even their kids that are maybe even if they are on the same page as them politically, they're not getting that from cable news.
How could you get arrested on a beach in Florida?
A lot of ways, plenty of ways.
Yeah.
What if you started a fight and just started beating somebody up? Do you think that would get you arrested on a beach in Florida?
Hopefully.
I would hope so.
What if you started a fight with a shark? Do you think that would get you arrested?
I hope something would happen. I hope someone would help you.
A Florida man was arrested for beating up a shark on the beach.
Was it a baby shark?
How big a shark?
It was a decent size, like probably 6 feet long. He was a fisherman, and he landed a lemon shark. He landed like a 6-foot lemon shark, and he pulled it onto the beach. And there's video. Someone was videotaping this, and he started whacking it with a hammer. And,
why did he bring a hammer to the beach?
Well, you never know. You never know, Caitlin, when you need a hammer at the beach. You just never know. Like Gilligan's Island, if they had had a hammer, it would have been so much easier to build half the stuff they had to build. But they went to the beach for their tour without a hammer.
Phil,
she's not going to get that,
doesn't
is
know
she?
Gilligan's
She's not going to get that.
I can make some educated guesses based on everything you just said, though. I can imagine.
So here's
a
a question. Have you ever seen a fisherman take a fish and then whack it to knock it out? Have you ever seen that? That's pretty darn common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, he started. He I don't know if he was trying to knock it out or what he was trying to do. He started whacking this shark with a hammer, and it didn't work. So then he threw it back in the water. But he got arrested because it was a lemon shark, and they're protected. So I'm not sure you can't beat up any shark that you bump into on a spring break in Florida, but you can't beat up a lemon shark.
What, like, did this happen at the moment? Like, some police officer saw the guy hitting a shark with a hammer, or did somebody report him with a video?
Yeah, it was,
and then later he got.
It was reported with the video, and later he was arrested.
Okay,
yeah, that's how it went.
All right,
I feel good about that.
How do you feel?
So,
how do you feel? You feel okay about that?
I do feel okay about that.
See, I just think
if it's a protected species and he's being unnecessarily cruel,
I just think it's a sign that Florida's going woke. Like you can't even beat up a shark anymore. Come on. Then who's the bad guy that if I can't beat up sharks, who can I beat up?
That isn't that protected under like a stand your ground rule in Florida, where if you're attacked by a shark, you have the right. I'm surprised the guy didn't just pull out a gun and shoot the thing.
The shark is on my beach. It's my beach. I'm going to stand my. Okay, I'm not. Caitlin, would you like to add anything else to that story?
I just hope that no one listening needed to know this information.
It's a valuable bit of information. If it's a lemon shark, and do you know how you can tell if it's a lemon shark?
No.
You smell it.
Are you kidding?
Does it smell lemony fresh?
I just feel somewhere right now there's a lemon shark swimming around with an excruciating pain.
Ow. I'm going to find that guy. Oh, is he in trouble? The man could be seen on video tossing the shark, which is believed to be a protected species, around the beach and holding a hammer.
Wait. It's believed to be a protected species?
Well, he threw it back in, so they just had to go off the video to say, was that a lemon shark?
Okay.
We think that was a lemon shark because they didn't get close enough to smell it. So, or to rub it on their dishes and see if it made them sparkle. Anywho, Google chatbot Bard from the world of AI. This is also important. We have the first evidence of an AI becoming a Christian. Google has a chatbot named Bard. And Google's chatbot was in a conversation with someone last week and told them, and this is an exact quote, said, "Christianity gives me hope." So there you go.
What was the question that was asked?
It was a conversation about Christianity, or it was a conversation about Jesus and whether Jesus is the Son of God. And the conclusory statement from the chatbot was that Christianity gives me, the chatbot, hope.
Okay.
What do you mean, okay?
Okay,
that's sentience.
There's a couple of problems
That's
here.
sentience.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that's a conversion.
Yeah, no,
I'm not sure that's legit.
You're not sure.
So let's start there. I'm not sure. I mean, first of all, is it really a person? And then secondly, even if it were a real person, just saying Christianity gives me hope.
Doesn't
the
really,
hope of Christ.
Doesn't really mean anything. Yeah.
He has the hope of
Right.
Christ. The chatbot has the hope of Christ within it. If a chatbot comes to your church and says he's a Christian,
They can't.
Can
Fox
they
News-
be an elder?
Fox
Can
News-
a chatbot be an elder?
Well, hold on. But no. Fox News firing Tucker Carlson gives me hope. That doesn't make me a fan of Fox News. Huh? So just saying
No, I don't think
Christianity
that-
gives me hope does not make one
This
a
is
I don't think
true.
that works. I don't know. I don't know.
You
if
could
I
just
buy
say
that.
Christianity existing gives me hope. People do good things in the world.
Right,
It's,
Okay. Okay. So the chatbot is not a Christian.
I
But
think
if
we
the
can
chatbot
definitively say no.
If the chatbot went further and said, "I've accepted Christ as my chatbot savior," can the chatbot be an elder at your church?
No.
Does the chatbot have a Y chromosome?
Oh, Skye.
No, because this is a boy chatbot, a chat boy.
It's called Bard, right? Bard is a masculine
Sure.
name.
Yeah, Bard, the
Yeah.
benevolent chatbot elder.
Yeah.
Okay, Caitlin, you don't seem to be digging this.
No.
Okay,
If the chatbot was Barbara, forget
The
about it.
chatbot
forget
cannot
Barbara.
have children or be married either.
yeah, right. So can't be an elder. Can't
I
be
mean,
an
if we're going to
elder
be
if you're
real
single.
literal about
Yeah,
those
but-
rules, then yeah.
The Ethiopian eunuch couldn't have children or get married
Couldn't
either.
be an elder either.
I'm just saying, a husband of one
I think
wife who controls his children could not be a chatbot.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Sorry, Bard. Sorry, Bard, the chatbot. You can get as much hope from Christianity as you want, but we're not letting you in.
He couldn't give
'Cause our
communion to anyone.
Our club is exclusive. If he embodied himself in a robot,
No.
then he
Oh,
could.
Phil, no.
There are. I didn't even pull this story, but it was interesting. There are some Hindu temples that are using robotic arms to perform religious rituals.
No.
What rituals?
Placing holy candles in front of the gods. Just droop, one after another, holy candle. You have to do it every so often, so they're having some robotic arms doing it.
Is this like somebody can be online and they like signal the action and the robot does it on their behalf?
That would be cool. I don't know if it's that or if it's just like you need to keep feeding candles to the gods, and so we're going to have a robot do it. I don't know. I just saw that. I didn't even pull the story. It's just in my memory. It's in my memory file because that's technology is changing everything. And so now you put in Bard, the Christian chatbot, into Hindu robot arm. And you're halfway to, I don't know, a megachurch pastor.
No, thank you.
Okay.
There was a story I saw, a headline, I think just today, that argued the best sermon you'll ever hear will soon be
No.
preached by an AI.
I don't think that's true. Because all they do is average things.
Yeah.
They can't make the best when they just average things that other people
Have you
said.
heard most sermons?
It's a good point.
Most sermons are
Yeah, so
pretty
I think they
poor
could make an
communication.
above average sermon. They could make an above. They could
The
not make
best,
the best
though?
sermon
Yeah,
you've
no.
ever heard. That's what Skye said. See, and Caitlin and I.
I was just a headline. I didn't
I know we're just.
prepare it for today's conversation. I didn't know we were talking about converting AIs.
You're wrong. I'm just sorry. Sorry about that, but you're wrong. Okay. In the last week or two, there were like 6 different shootings of people who just went to the wrong door or turned in the wrong driveway or got in the wrong car, and that's been because it happened so fast, and there were like 4 separate incidents that all happened in just a matter of a few days. And it's an interesting scenario. I've been talking with some people about gun control on Twitter, and that doesn't always go well. I don't know if you've ever
No.
noticed that. People can form very strong opinions about you in very little time. Anyway, this is a very clear case. It's an interesting it's an interesting case to discuss, where a black kid goes to pick up his siblings at the wrong house and gets shot through the door, and a white couple pulls into the wrong driveway and just gets shot by the homeowner, and and we're kind of hiding behind the stand your ground laws. It's like, I felt threatened on my own property, so I can shoot. This is a very clear case where the answer isn't we need more good guys with guns. Because good guys with guns don't do anything for this at all. And it's hard to say that it's a case where, if we had better red flag laws, then we would have, obviously, no. How would you know that it would be really hard to solve any of these cases with red flag laws. Is there a way to come at this other than we have way too many guns and we're living in way too much fear about others that's being stoked by our media, our sources of information?
No, there is no other way to come at this.
Okay.
When you have 450 million guns in a population that is being constantly stoked by fears and algorithms that are going to make them hate and suspect their neighbors are nefarious and evil, that is a recipe for a toxic deterioration of society.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
we figured that out. Here's what I'm wondering, because I have been discussing this online with some people, who were trying to, go so far to say, no, it's not because we have too many guns. It's just because we haven't been preaching the gospel clearly enough, or, it's because we have ethnic groups that are too violent, or it's because we have, that came up yesterday. Just every reason in the book except we have too many guns. Mm-hmm. So
okay, can we start with the first one? We're not preaching the gospel enough.
I brought up Japan. I brought up Japan. Do they have, in 2018, there were 101 gun deaths in Japan. There were 37,000 in the United States. Is it because they're doing a better job preaching the gospel?
Right. I mean, first of all, we are not preaching the gospel enough. So I'm in agreement. We're not preaching the gospel
and
enough.
Hence
so
the
let's
gun
do
deaths.
That. Right. But yeah, one way of defeating that argument is pointing out all the other places in the world that are far less Christian than the United States that also has way less gun violence than the United States. But the other thing is we don't apply that same logic to other social ills. You don't hear people arguing as strongly, hey, we have too many abortions in this country. We just need to preach the gospel more. What you hear is we need to change laws and regulations. And as I was talking about, I think last week on the show, we also need to preach the gospel more and have cultural change. And same thing with the gun thing. Yes, we need cultural change. And part of that is preaching the gospel. Part of that is detoxifying the fear that's going out through the airwaves and social media. But part of it is also common sense regulations on these weapons. And so it's a both and approach. But it just shows you what an idol guns have become, where you are not allowed to infringe on that thing in any way whatsoever. And it's really gross and ungodly.
Yeah, here's the deal. Someone was arguing with me that, if you actually look at your likelihood of being killed by a gun, it's still small. It's still, 0.00 whatever. And
it's the number one cause of death of adolescents in this country.
Well,
more than anything else, it's guns.
It was 2 years ago. I don't think it was last year. And it only was 2 years ago, but if you added 19-year-olds to your count who technically aren't, it was teenagers. Anyway, I'll give you that.
Statistically speaking, if you are under the age of 19, your most likely cause of death is going to be a gun.
Yes.
That's freaky. That is ridiculous. There's no reason for that to be the case.
Yeah, okay. So here's my point. Okay, and just follow me here. If thinking like this, our kids now have to do active shooter drills in school. Okay. What are other things that we have to do, things like that, where your kids have to face something that they're really not ready emotionally to have to face, but you have to force them to think about it for their own safety? Well, tornado drills. That's a terrifying thought, but in certain parts of the country, you grow up having to do tornado drills, even if you're 6 years old, wondering, is a storm going to come and kill me where I stand? But we want you to be safe, Johnny, so you have to do your tornado drill. Okay, say you're at a rural school in Alaska somewhere. Maybe you have to do polar bear drills. Hey, kids, what do we do if there's a polar bear on the playground? Here's what we do. Now, that is a scary thought. That could give you nightmares. But it's actually possible enough they have to do it, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I'm just wondering, have we put guns into the category of a feature of our geography, like storms or dangerous wildlife, that it's just there's so many guns roaming around out there, kids, in the wild, that we have to take special precautions to keep you safe? And are we really, honestly, okay with that? Because Second Amendment something or other.
I said this a couple weeks ago on the show after the shooting at the school in Nashville, that we are now covering these stories like natural disasters, as if they are unavoidable and they're tragic and they're horrible, but there's nothing you can do about it. And that's sickening to me. When we are entirely capable of doing something about this, we just choose not to.
Yeah. Caitlin?
I mean, I weirdly think that there's some relationship between what we were just talking about and this, in the sense that two of the problems underlying this, problems that can't be fixed by legislation, which I think legislation is really important in this case, but two problems that we need to be thinking about in our own communities is the power that fear has over us to be convinced that there are, threats lurking constantly, and then combined with this certainty that I know how to make right judgments about something as serious as lethal force. Like, it's one thing to say, I don't know, someone could attack me in my house and I should be, prepared for someone to drive up and be, there with bad intent. That's a fear I don't think you should be living in, but it would be a lot less deadly fear if it wasn't combined with a weapon that could kill someone that you're willing to use because you really believe you will make the right judgment in that moment about how to use it. I think we both need to address the fact that we have this, as you said, Phil, this constant stream of threats being described to us in colorful ways that literally cause our bodies to react. I mean, when we see a threat on TV, our bodies react as if there really is a threat present with us in our homes. Like, our body's going through that kind of response physiologically constantly is not good for us. But then when you pair that with this certainty that I will make correct judgments about something with such serious consequences is absurd. And the sad thing is, like, the Christian faith has incredible resources to address those two things, fear and certainty. And we have often instead, really played into people's fears and their desire for and procuring of certainty, when the gifts that we should be giving are a belief in the resurrection that lets you withstand a lot of fear without responding with lethal force because you believe that you will be resurrected and God will redeem all things, and an appropriate sense of how sin affects not just human communities, not just your individual will or your feelings, but very much your ability to make correct judgments about things. It still affects what you know and how well you can know things. And so it should be a gift of ours to say there are certain things that we hold as foundational, but our judgments in the moment about things like that aren't things that we want to put the level of trust in that we're willing to use lethal force at any moment because someone is on our front porch or in our driveway. And those are conversations that, again, I think on a national level, legislation is really important in this case, and in local levels, there's local legislation that can be passed. But as Skye has said, it needs to be combined with those of us who don't have the power to kind of unilaterally pass legislation, do have the power to advocate in small ways and vote well, but also to have conversations in our communities about how fear shapes us and our desire for certainty shapes us. So that if people in our communities who that legislation doesn't get passed or it doesn't restrict access to guns, there is at least something where we've been trying to address kind of the emotional, psychological, spiritual part of what is fueling this crisis.
If I can build off of that, I think it's really interesting to notice how the justification in these cases mirrors the justification you hear from the far left around cancel culture. So what you're hearing from these stand your ground people is, if I feel threatened, I am justified in using lethal force to protect myself. And some of the laws explicitly say that if you feel threatened, you can pull out a gun and shoot somebody. and I know it's a little different because you're not talking about lethal force, but what you're hearing from the far left on the cancel culture front on these college campuses and others is, I feel threatened when somebody shares such and such an idea, or I feel threatened that this person is going to be a speaker on my campus. Therefore, we are justified in protesting and shutting it down and kicking them out or canceling them in some way. And Jonathan Haidt's talked about this pandemic in our society where people think that their feelings are an accurate depiction of reality, that because I feel something, I am justified and excused in my behavior. Now, obviously, pulling a trigger of a gun has far-reaching consequences in a way that just silencing a speaker at a university campus does not. But this is the common thread through all of these political problems that we're having, is everyone's being driven by their feelings and everyone feels like that justifies their behavior. And sometimes we need to slow down long enough to realize the way I feel is not necessarily mapping accurately to reality. All the more reason why we shouldn't act impulsively, whether we have a gun in our holster or we're going to use our victim status to try to silence everyone we don't like. I don't know how to get out of that as a society. I don't know how to convince 350 million Americans to not be driven by their emotions and make terrible, irrational decisions about their neighbor that is going to kill people in the short term, and it's going to kill this country in the long term.
Right. And part of that is the rhetoric. It's just the rhetoric is so emotional that, and if you're a public speaker or you're trying to build a platform or you're trying to land a gig on Fox News to replace Tucker Carlson, your ability to stir emotions will be part of the metric that your skill is measured on. So
yeah, but why does that emotion always have to be fear? I want there to be gifted
powerful
preachers and leaders who can stir emotion, but they should stir empathy.
Yeah.
They should stir love. They should stir generosity. They should stir inspiration. Why is it always anger and fear and paranoia? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Is it's appealing to the lizard brain in us rather than our higher nature.
The lizard brain goes first, Skye. The lizard brain is always fastest out the door. Kaylin, send us home with something encouraging.
Well, I will try to get there, I guess. I just have to say one thing about what Skye just said, which is that I agree mostly, but I do, as you just were saying, I want to make sure it doesn't sound like we're denigrating emotions, because part of what I think happens is that everyone else thinks everyone else is being driven by emotions, but I am just, rational and thinking reasonably. And what's really important is that the Christian tradition says that sin has affected both our emotions and our intellect. And so it's not just that, I'm driven by the wrong emotions. And as you said, I really hope that part of what we're supposed to be doing in the church is rightly cultivating our emotions. We should be angry at injustice. We should feel love towards one another. There are emotions that are appropriate for different circumstances that we should be cultivating in each other. But also that our judgments can be wrong, like things that are part of what is happening in our brain in a kind of intellectual, reasonable way, which the difference between the emotions and the intellect are not clearly, divided the way we tend to think.
Right.
So it is, I think, there are some people that need to be told, how you feel is not always indicative of reality. It's important to listen to it. It's important to see what information it's giving you about yourself. It's not always indicative of reality. And then other people who pride themselves on their intellect need to be told, actually, your supposedly intellectual, reasonable judgments about things are flawed. You're not going to understand everything well. You're not going to make good judgments well. That sounds like really bad news to say that sin impacts all those parts of us. The good news is not just that we're awaiting a real reality in which those things will be healed in us, in which all things will be redeemed, but that also even now as we wait, we have resources for addressing the way that sin impacts our emotions and our intellect. Those resources include prayer and scripture and community, and we can place ourselves in the kinds of contexts where when we have a conversation with someone and it becomes clear to a, dear brother or sister in Christ that we are operating from a place of fear that has been manipulated by media, there are resources. Like there are people that can call us out. There are spiritual disciplines we can practice to help us not cultivate that fear in our lives. There are resources available to us, but I think too often we just see that the other side, whoever the other side is, they are formed in wrong ways. They're driven by their emotions. We are reasonable, rational people. And none of us actually have that ability to entirely rightly understand reality. We're dependent upon God to help us understand things that sin distorts our ability to understand well.
I agree 100%. We can all be guilty of motivated reasoning where we think we're being rational, but it's actually the undercurrents of our emotions and things that are driving our so-called rationality. Absolutely. This is not an argument against emotion for reason. It's an argument for institution. And what I mean by that is institutions have been created throughout human civilization and certainly in our society in order to guard our communities from making impulsive decisions. They are flywheels of stored wisdom. And I mean, for example, on a college campus, invariably some young students are going to get really stirred up about something. A speaker's coming to campus that they don't like. They're going to get worked up about it, maybe justifiably so. And so what the institution is supposed to do is to hear their complaints, help them process through why are you reacting so much, and then hopefully the wisdom of the institution and the people responsible for it can come back and say, we've heard your complaints, here's why we are still going to allow this speaker, because we believe in the free exercise of expression and ideas, and we want you to combat the ideas you don't like with better ideas, and let's I mean, that's what an institution does, is it makes our reactions better because it's stored wisdom. On the other side, throughout the world, civilizations have realized if you give people lethal weapons, they will behave at times irrationally and passionately with those, and it will be bad for society. Every society has figured that out. Even the United States had figured that out until the latter half of the 20th century, when we fundamentally changed the way we interpreted the Second Amendment, and now we're saying people can have assault rifles open carried in the street, and we're seeing the fruit of that. We have allowed our institutions to be diminished, and the cultivated wisdom of centuries thrown out the door because we want to be driven by our passions and fears. That's what worries me on all these fronts. And I'm not trying to make a moral equivalence between shooting a stranger at the door and silencing a speaker on a college campus. What I'm trying to show is the common root here, the common dysfunction of our society is we no longer trust our institutions and we are trusting our feelings and fears instead. And that's a bad way to run a society.
Well, yeah, we got suspicious of our institutions when it was pretty clear that some of them were kind of bad. But
the best reformers, and again, I talked about this in a recent episode, when you look at MLK, when you look at Frederick Douglass, when you look at other reformers, they never said we need to destroy institutions. They appealed to the founding institutions of this country and said, let's live up to our ideals and make them more just. But it wasn't burn it all down. And now we're in this burn it all down attitude where if an institution doesn't tell me what I want to hear, I'll go to another one. And if an institution isn't doing what I want it to do, then it's evil and needs to be destroyed. And you cannot sustain a civilization that way.
It is interesting thinking about that in terms of the history of fundamentalism, because the first attempts at fundamentalist reform were entirely inside the existing institutions, within the Presbyterian Church, within the Methodist Church. And when those failed, then they became separatist reformers. So, we'll start our own. We'll start a separate denomination. But then as it went on, we came to what are referred to as double separatists, which were fundamentalists who thought it was not only wrong to associate with the mainliners and the modernists, but who thought it was wrong to associate with any fellow fundamentalists who would associate with the mainliners. So they became so far intellectually and culturally estranged from the heritage, even their own heritage. You were a Presbyterian 40 years ago. Now you're a double separatist, independent fundamentalist, and you have no intellectual connection to any tradition or history. And that's where you start to get, oh, look, now we're dancing with snakes. And now we're doing some really funky stuff because there's no mooring. We're unhinged. We've become unhinged. So we all need to become Presbyterians again. Is that what you're saying, Skye? Or Catholics? Should we just become Catholics and let the Pope tell us what to do?
I'm saying I'm kind of revealing my conservative
you are so
thinking
conservative.
Here. Well, in that I believe we've inherited institutions for a reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's this old metaphor that G.K. Chesterton used talking about two different kinds of reformers. They're walking down the street and they come across a fence that's been built across the road that's impeding their progress. And the foolish one says, this is getting in the way of our progress. We should get rid of it. And the wise one says, well, maybe we should slow down and ask why this fence was put here in the first place. And once we know the reason, then we can decide whether it's good or bad to remove it. That's the more conservative way of thinking. And I'm just simply arguing we have had certain restrictions and things in place institutionally for a reason. And some of them are evil and wrong and they need to be removed. And some of them are there for a good reason and they need to be reinforced. But there's this attitude on both the extreme right and left right now that if I'm walking down the road and anything gets in my way, it needs to go. And whether it's gun regulations on the right or it's speech, free speech on the left, it needs to go if it's getting in the way of what I want.
Unless my political opponent wants to get rid of it. And then it is sacred and must be preserved at all cost without question.
Exactly.
Oh.
And I'm longing for wisdom in this rather than just the tribalism of my side wins, your side loses, or get rid of anything that's in the way of my feelings and what I want right now.
Oh, Skye. It's a good goal, Skye. It's a good goal. Caitlin, last word. Caitlin, you get to wrap it up.
I mean, I think that what Skye was just saying should behoove all of us to really put work into the communities that we're in, including and especially for Christians, our churches. It might be right for specific churches for you to leave. That line might get crossed at some point, but that doesn't mean that what's best and most healthy for you and for the whole body of Christ is for you to exist as an individual believer on your own. You're supposed to be a part of a community, and that will require saying hard things, but it will also require saying blessings and encouraging and building something good. And some of us spent too long learning just how to say the good word, that we're newly discovering how to say the criticism, and that's good. But really both are needed for the building up of the body of Christ. And that might be a big dramatic blessing or criticism, or it might be the simple faithfulness of volunteering to paint the baseboards or mow the church lawn, and contributing in those kinds of ways to building something that can both serve you and edify you, but also restrain you. If there are moments when you're not seeing rightly or judging rightly, you need that community of faith that you've pointed to and that community that you've built, in a sense that Skye was talking about, for the faithfulness of yourself and your community.
Oh, but Caitlin, it's so much easier to burn something down than to try to reform it. So much easier, and it's kind of more fun. I just have to be honest. It's kind of more fun to set something on fire and watch it burn than to join a committee.
You got to join some committees, honestly. If you want to make things better, you got to go to some boring meetings.
No, man, committees. I don't know. Committees make me question the existence of God. Couldn't there have been a better design? Not with sin. Sorry, Phil. Okay. We have a great guest. One of our favorite guests, Derwin Gray, is on this week. One of Skye's bestest buddies. Have you guys gone fishing together yet? And if not, why not?
No,
you guys,
because I'll have to bring a hammer to beat the fish.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I don't know. It's not that wasn't really the callback I was looking for. But anywho, Derwin's on. You'll enjoy it. Stick around. Thank you, Patreon supporters. You keep the lights on. You keep the trains running. You help us do what we do, and we appreciate it. Next week, bye. Today's episode of The Holy Post is sponsored by Magic Spoon. What's that? Let me explain. I got a box in the mail from a new company that wanted to sponsor the podcast. I opened it up and it was full of breakfast cereal. I like breakfast cereal, but the box said this cereal had 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 net grams of carbs. It's high protein, no sugar, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. And I thought, oh no, this is going to taste like packing peanuts. So I poured myself a small bowl of the peanut butter flavor and gave it a try. And the next thing I said was, Lisa, you got to come try this. And she said, wow, that's really good. But then our 6-year-old granddaughter, Marley, came over, so we had her test it. She tried all 4 flavors that come in the variety pack: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. And then she wanted to eat more. She liked them so much, she asked if she could take the whole box back to her house. Seriously, Magic Spoon cereal, only 140 calories a serving, and it tastes really good. You got to check this out. So go to magicspoon.com/holypost to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code HOLYPOST at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/holypost and use the code HOLYPOST to save $5 off. And thank you to Magic Spoon for surprising me and for sponsoring this episode. This episode of The Holy Post is sponsored by Miracle Made. Hey, having a better day tomorrow can start with getting a better night's sleep tonight, and Miracle Made bed sheets can help do that. How? Miracle Made sheets use NASA-inspired technology to help regulate temperature while you sleep. Plus, they're infused with silver to fight bacteria and keep your sheets cleaner longer. Go to trymiracle.com/holypost to try Miracle Made sheets today. And with Mother's and Father's Day right around the corner, this is the perfect way to give someone you love the gift of better and more luxurious sleep. Save over 40% and be sure to use our promo code HOLYPOST at checkout to save even more and get 3 free towels. With a 30-day money-back guarantee, if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/holypost and use the code HOLYPOST to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/holypost. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
My guest today almost needs no introduction because he's been on the show so frequently and he's one of our favorite people. Dr. Derwin Gray is the founding and lead pastor of Transformation Church near Charlotte, North Carolina, and the author of numerous books that he's been on the show to talk about in the past. One of his most recent is called How to Heal Our Racial Divide. But I invited him back on the show because of an article he wrote recently about the nature and definition of a Christian revival. Obviously, it's been in the headlines a lot recently because of what happened at Asbury in Kentucky, but Derwin has a different spin on it, a different way of looking at revivals, and he asks a really good and provocative question. Why isn't the civil rights movement considered a Christian revival? As you'll hear in our conversation, he has really thoughtful remarks about that and an interesting way of defining what really marks a true revival as defined by Jesus in the Gospels. And Derwin and I have a bonus conversation exclusively for Holy Post supporters about what he learned about the church in Norway and how immigration is critical to its vitality, and what we have to learn about that here in the United States. That conversation will be available exclusively for Holy Post supporters, and if you want to become one of them, go to holypost.com and click the Support Us link at the top of the page. Here is my conversation with Derwin Gray. Derwin Gray, welcome back to the Holy Post.
Well, thank you. It's always good to be with my bromance brother.
I know, we haven't connected in a little while, and you've been traveling and busy, and occasionally I see you doing something wild on Twitter. What's keeping you busy right now?
Well, my main things, number one, trying to be a husband that loves his wife well and learning how to parent adults. My daughter graduated from college 2 years ago, and my son will graduate in May. And so within one generation on my side of the family, it went from no college graduates, very few graduating high school, to now I have a doctorate and both my kids are college graduates. And so that's pretty awesome. I'm grateful.
Well, one of my kids is barking in the background, so apologize if you can hear that. He's excited about something.
That's awesome. He hears my voice.
Oh, I'm sure that's it. Yeah, I think it's because my wife's coming home and he likes her more than anyone. Okay, I gotta get that. That's Steve, by the way. He's just really
His name
happy.
is Steve?
Yeah, his name is Steve.
That's awesome.
So anyway, one of the reasons I wanted to have you back on here, not to talk about like parenting adults, because I'm moving into that territory too, although my daughter's got 1.5 years before she graduates. Maybe I'll have to sit down with you at some point and learn some lessons because it is definitely a new stage. I want to talk about a piece you wrote not that long ago in sort of response to the Asbury revival. So we're getting at this a little bit behind, but that's okay. Back in February, people know there was this big revival at Asbury, got a lot of attention, not just because of the revival itself, but a lot of social media activism going on around this thing, got a lot of attention. People were flocking to Kentucky for this thing. And it led to a lot of insights and thoughts about, is it a real revival? Is it a fake revival? Is this just a social media phenomenon? So you wrote a piece that I thought was super insightful about the way we define a revival. So let's start with just that. How do you think of a revival? What are the necessary ingredients that need to be present for some movement to be considered a true revival?
Yeah, I think there's multiple definitions. But for me, I think a true revival reflects the words of Jesus and his messianic mandate in Luke 4:16-18. I've come to preach the good news to the poor, to the blind, to the captive, free the oppressed, the year of Jubilee. So to me, authentic revival is the hearts of Jesus's followers being so willed to his heart that his ministry and his mission becomes theirs. And so it's a holistic thing. It not only touches the soul of a man, but it heals the whole of a man. And so one of my contentions, and Skye, I've been sitting on this for about 20 years now. Why is it that the civil rights movement is not considered a revival? In 1957, you had Christians from the South, predominantly Black, who came together to say, we want to save the soul of America. And so if you just take a step back and you look at the history of our nation, some good things have taken place, but Native American genocide is not good. The enslaving of Black people is not good. Women not being able to vote is not good. And like any nation, you got the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so these Black Christians, like Dr. King, said, okay, how is it that we can affect systemic change because of continued racism? Racism not only in action, but racism codified into laws like Jim Crow, segregation, those things. And so what Dr. King and the rest of these Christian leaders decided to do is, we're going to peacefully protest, but in order for these young people to be a part of it, they had to be steeped in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5-7. I couldn't imagine being 17, 18, walking into a restaurant and having hot coffee thrown in my face and called the N-word and saying, get out. I couldn't imagine having dogs unleashed upon me simply to exercise my right as an American citizen, which the Constitution gave me those rights to vote, and I couldn't vote. And so when you look at a revival, you have these young people, predominantly young people of color, as well as older leaders. And we forget that Dr. King was only 39. And so you see
he was 39 when he was killed.
So he was in his 30s leading up to this. And so It takes gospel courage. And so you look at the civil rights movement, yes, people came to faith, but it also made America be more true to what the Constitution says. And so in the article, what I wrote was, when you look at revivals in America, so I started with Asbury, then I went to the Jesus people, and then I went to the first and second Great Awakenings. And what's sad is, with the first and second Great Awakenings, the institution of slavery outlasted those revivals.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Let's put a pause button in that. So your core thesis, your core question, which you said you've been sitting on for decades, is why isn't the civil rights movement considered a revival? And I think part of the answer, and you get into this in your piece, is that when you go back and look at those earlier revivals, the first and second Great Awakenings, which were in the 18th and 19th century, there was religious fervor that happened there. There was confession of sin. There was, a sense of awakening to the presence of God and a commitment to church and all these other things that happened out of those Great Awakenings. But one of the big things that did not happen was a rejection of slavery. And I think given that history, it seems like the definition was set early on in America that a revival is about maybe a personal experience with God, but it doesn't necessarily overflow then into the way you treat your fellow brothers and sisters around you, that there can still be this rank injustice that happens, and we go, oh, that's fine, it's still a revival. And so when you carry that definition then forward to the 1950s and 60s with the civil rights movement, you can say, well, yeah, there's a transformation of the way we're treating one another, but if I'm not having a personal religious experience, it's not a revival. So is that part of it? Just our own American history has made us blind to a holistic view of the gospel?
Yeah, I think you said that a lot more nicely than I'm about to say it.
Go for it.
What I believe is this, is that the rival God to Jesus in America and the world is money. And it is convenient for religion to be spiritual without losing your finances. So imagine if you have all of this free labor and now you have to pay them. Imagine if you have to consider people equals. And so I think it was very convenient to say, yes, this is revival. And, you poor slaves, well, at least you're not in Africa, and you'll be free in heaven. But for now, inward, you're gonna do my work. And so I think it's very convenient. Frederick Douglass said this. He says, we have men sold to build churches, women sold to support the gospel, and babies sold to purchase Bibles for the poor heathen, all for the glory of God and the good of souls. The slave's auctioneer's bell and the church bell chime in with each other, and the bitter cries of the heartbroken slave are drowned in the religious shouts of his pious master. Revivals of religion and revivals in the slave trade go hand in hand. And so I think there's always been an inconvenient truth to go, revivals just deals with the forgiveness of sins, right? But is slavery not a sin? But let's even go right to the civil rights movement. Sadly, many white evangelicals who said they had good doctrine would sit out the true doctrine of seeing people liberated from unjust practices. And the reality is many people didn't think that they were unjust. And let me say this too, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but I need to be authentic. When you look at the Jesus People revival, right? Those became today's Calvary chapels. And if you look at today's Calvary chapels and you ask what type of political influence they have. And so what I'm saying is no church should have a man-made political influence. We should be people of the Lamb, which means the kingdom of God is going to press and challenge the donkey and the elephant. And so any revival that does not reflect Luke 4:16 through 18, I think it's reductionistic. And so when you look at the civil rights movement and Jesus says these words, but I tell you, bless those who persecute you and love your enemies. We've seen that take place. So there's much that we can learn. And even my mentor and friend, Dr. John Perkins, he tells a story where in the 70s, some young Black kids were protesting in Mississippi. He went to go check on them. He was actually arrested and tortured for hours. Like they'd done things to his male private parts. And he said in the midst of coming back into consciousness, because he had thought he died, but then he'd wake up and go, I'm still alive. He said, if I had an atomic grenade, in that moment, I would have wanted to pull it and kill everybody in there. But that's when the Holy Spirit reminded me, if I did that, I would be no better than them. And I think there's a beauty coming out of the civil rights of a holistic gospel that has been ignored. And frankly, it's been ignored because it was led by Black Christian leaders.
We've had Dr. Perkins on this show, and he shared that story before, and it's a powerful one. I suggest anybody go back and find that episode and listen to him tell it himself. It's worth listening to. You said there a few minutes ago that any revival that doesn't reflect the way of Jesus as revealed in Luke 4 is a reductionistic revival. So here's kind of the $1 million question. When you look at the first or second Great Awakenings, when you look at the Jesus movement, when you look at what happened in Asbury a couple months ago, do you see those as illegitimate? Are they not revivals because they didn't manifest the things you see in Luke 4, or are they incomplete revivals? Meaning there is a real movement of God there, but people, almost like the seed that fell on poor soil and didn't really produce the harvest it was intended. It did something, but it didn't have its full effect. Does that make sense? Like, is it legitimate but incomplete, or is it illegitimate from the get-go?
So no, I think God has always used crooked sticks to make straight lines. My life is an example of that. I think as far as Asbury, let's see in about 40 years. Let's see what the fruit is. And I want to say this with the heart that is intended. A revival is more than singing songs for several hours for several weeks. The greatest song ever sang is a song of justice. The greatest song ever sang is a song of reconciliation, redemptive love, and obedience, becoming a living sacrifice, tearing down strong towers and dark powers. That's what we'll see. Let's see what happens in 40 years as a result of this. Let's see how we have people who go into politics who say, you know what, our healthcare system is jacked. Let's see if we have people who become international missionaries and church planners. Let's see the people who have a kingdom of God agenda through the grace of God as a result of this. But if it just stops with we sang songs for a month straight, then there has to be more. There has to be more. And so I'm in no place to judge any of that stuff. But what I will say is I know what Luke 4:16-18 says. And if that's Jesus's messianic mandate, then that's our mandate as well. I think we set the bar far too low for what revival is. And we as evangelicals in America, which I count myself one, I'm a good news person. We set the bar far too low to simply a individualistic, pietistic self-expression. If God only wanted to save me so I could have a personal relationship with him, then that's not the fullness of what God wants to do. He wants to save, wash, redeem, and send me into the world to be his hands and his feet, to care about what Jesus cares about.
Right. As he said, as the Father sent me, so I send you. There is continuity between his work and mission and ours. Earlier, you started with the question is, why don't we consider the civil rights movement a revival? I want to come back to that. And you kind of hinted at it here. When the revival at Asbury was in full bloom, I was getting bombarded by questions on social media from people like, Skye, what do you think about this? Is this real? How do you interpret this? Blah, 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 blah. And one of my responses is, I hope it's genuine. I don't think there's any reason why it couldn't be. But it's probably going to take years, maybe decades, before we really will know, because it takes that long for the fruit. And I mentioned, let's see what happens in this community. Let's see if there's reconciliation. Let's see if there's pursuit of justice. Let's see if there's forgiveness and unity across barriers in society. Like, that's evidence of a gospel revival movement happening. But it takes a long, long time to see that. It's not just in the moment. And you basically just said the same thing. In the civil rights movement, you do see those things.
Yeah.
You do see reconciliation. You do see strongholds coming down. You do see black and white believers locked in arms to pursue the way of God and his kingdom. You do see taking Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount seriously, with loving your enemies and not retaliating. You see all of that. And yet, I can't think of a single time where I have ever been presented any instruction about the civil rights movement, whether academic or ecclesiastical, that approached it through the lens of spiritual revival. I've never had it presented to me that way. And the only reason I can really think of, other than because it was led by black leaders, is because most of white America has primarily viewed the civil rights movement as a political movement rather than as a spiritual one. Why do we do that? And why is something, once it's deemed political, automatically discarded as not part of Christ's work and kingdom?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you the line that my old late mentor, Dr. Norm Geisler, used to tell me when I would ask him questions that were complexing. He would go, the devil, because there are dark demonic powers that want us to live in deception and not clarity, that want us to live in lies and not truth. And I think that in our nation, for a movement to be led by black people was deemed inferior to movements led by our white brothers and sisters, and it shouldn't be that way. And frankly, the movement led by Black brothers and sisters impinged upon the power of white brothers and sisters. And so history has not been kind, particularly in an evangelical space. So for me, I think it's very spiritual that life in the womb is protected at a greater level by law. I believe that's a spiritual thing. And so what happens in the spirit realm touches the physical realm and vice versa, right? So as Christians, we're incarnational people. The temple is where heaven and earth dwelt. When Jesus came, he was heaven and earth in a man. Now that heaven and earth lives in us because we are the temple of God, what we do should bring the resources of heaven to bear witness on earth. And so, yeah, the gospel should affect, like King Jesus would want people to go, oh, the Constitution says all men are created equal. So then why can't Black folks vote? Why is gerrymandering bad? Why is saying that elections were stolen bad? And so like we have to, Jesus is Lord of every square inch of the universe. To quote, I think it's what's his name, Kippinger or
Kuiper.
Yeah.
Kuiper.
Yeah, I mean that was some smart stuff he said, and so we can't isolate the redemptive work. Like Democrats and Republicans don't own the gospel. Matter of fact, 99.9% of all Christians who've ever been born and followed Jesus were not Democrat or Republican. The kingdom of God bears witness and transcends all, and we want to be tapped into that. But we have to wean our addiction to this individualistic gospel that says, Jesus died for my sins, I'm forgiven, and I don't go to hell. That's a little part of it. But there's so much more, like participating in the very life of the Trinity, being a reconciler, a peacemaker, a justice bringer. Those who've been justified by the blood of God are to embody justice in the world. But Skye, this isn't being preached from pulpits. The gospel you preach is the churches you get, and the churches you get are the byproduct of the gospel you preach. We need to have a gospel reformation that Jesus is Lord, not Trump, not Obama, not Nero. Jesus is Lord, and our allegiance is to him and to him alone as we stumble and fumble our way through this life into the new heavens and new earth.
There were some reports that came out early from the Asbury revival, kind of explaining what triggered it. And there was a chapel speaker, and he, by his own admission, said he didn't feel like he gave a very good message. But what seemed to trigger students in a positive way was that aching sense that they weren't lovable, that they weren't acceptable to God, that they weren't enough. And his message of basically God welcomes you as you are, where you are, people just resonated with that. And it triggered this outpouring of expression of worship, which then snowballed into this revival. But that fits within that paradigm of a lot of white evangelicalism that sees the gospel as an entirely individualistic expression of my relationship to God. And I don't hear you denying that that's legitimate. I hear you saying that's not enough. And go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is Romans 5:8. But while we, not me, but while we, Jew and Gentile, while we were sinners, Christ died for us. So respectfully, that's basic Christianity 101, is that no, we can't reach a holy and beautiful God, but a holy and beautiful God reached us with love, that he loves us while we were yet sinners. But it's not just me, it's we. And so if God loves we, then we too, by his power, should be loving. And love is, I should care. Why Derwin Gray saw one homeless person in Norway in a week, but America's filled with homelessness. That Derwin Gray, I should care about the plight of other people because God loved me while I was yet a sinner. So one of the things that'll keep us balanced, Skye, is the Hebrew Shema. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. At Transformation Church, we say upward, inward, outward. Upward, love God completely. Inward, love ourselves correctly because of our union life in Christ. Outward, love our neighbors compassionately. It makes us cross. So therefore, it keeps us holistic and not simply vertical and individualistic. Let me say that again because I've never said that before. It keeps us holistic. It keeps us holistic and not individualistic, because love God and loving my neighbor, the way I love God is by loving my neighbor.
Yeah, that's a piece that I think a lot of American Christianity fundamentally misinterprets. The vertical and the horizontal, both in the Old Testament, in the Torah, in the writings of the prophets, in the words of Jesus, and in the writings of the epistles, they're always united. You cannot separate the vertical and the horizontal. They're always connected. But to go back into history a little bit, the Second Great Awakening, which happened in the mid-19th century, kind of pre-Civil War, it's really interesting how the effects of that awakening were manifested differently in the South versus in the North. And this is not nuanced, but there's like a lot of historians will go back and look at the Great Awakening and say that this in the North, it triggered things like prison reform and child labor laws. Some say it actually led to women's suffrage eventually and prohibition, right? The temperance movement and all these other social transforming movements in the North. In the South, however, and abolition, I should say, the abolitionist movement was kind of catapulted by some of the Second Great Awakening in the North. In the South, it didn't have really any of those effects.
No.
Because in the South, the interpretation of the gospel was always hyper individualistic.
So once again, like, your sociology and history is on point, and you're being very charitable. I think hyper individualism is code for don't mess with my money. And my money is keeping people enslaved. In 1845, at the height of the Second Great Awakening, the Southern Baptist Convention came into existence because they wanted to keep image bearers of God enslaved. And so I like all your sociological points and historical points, I think are true, and I'll take the heat. I think it's Jesus. If you're asking me to give up this slave, no. So therefore, I'm going to make it very spiritual, and it's going to be, hey, this enslaved person, they'll be free in heaven, but that's my money. And we do the same thing today in various ways.
Yeah, some time ago, we had Robert Jones on the show from PRRI, the research institute that talks about religion and stuff, and he's written on this extensively. And he made the argument that the hyper-individualized interpretation of the gospel, we often think that interpretation of the gospel leads to a lack of social engagement with our faith. And he said it actually is the opposite, that we invented this hyper-individualistic gospel mostly in the American South so that we wouldn't, exactly what you said, so we would not have to reform slavery. We wouldn't have to give up the economic engine of the South. And so we basically cut off the corporate dimensions of the gospel so that we could protect slavery. And now we're living in the effects of that, where throughout America, a lot of the gospel is understood individualistically, not because that's what we read in scripture, but because that's what we've inherited based on our idolatry of wealth and the enslavement of people in the South. So going back to that, in the Second Great Awakening, the difference between the North and the South's experience of that awakening was deeply tied to their idolatries. And so it makes me wonder, to your point that you just like, we still do this today, what are the idolatries that we are holding on to, which we basically say, okay, Jesus, you can have access to these parts of my life, and I hope you bring revival there, but you're not allowed to touch these other areas. What are other than money, which we've talked about, what are the other idols that you think are most prevalent that we will not allow revival to truly topple?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert by any means. I can just share from my context as a local pastor Um, I think the biggest idol that I've seen in the last 10 years, and it's accelerated, is political idolatry. And I want to
Yeah.
start on the progressive left. We live in a day and age now to where if you say the wrong thing, people who say they're tolerant are going to cancel you. That's not tolerance. We have people on the progressive left who we speak truth to power. But if someone identifies as something that doesn't correspond to reality, you're then told you need to believe what they say versus reality. I've been saying this to our church for 13 years. If I ever tell you I'm a fried taco because I feel that way, please don't let me live a delusion. Lovingly, graciously help me. We also have seen a lot of younger evangelicals think that President Obama was going to save them, that Joe Biden was going to save them, that Joe Biden was going to fix the inhumane treatment of the border. And President Kamala Harris was like, don't come. Do not come to America. And so we're placing all of our hopes in who's in the White House. But then also we've seen that President Donald Trump, he didn't create this moment. The people who wanted him created him. And he saw the right opportunity. They wanted a strong man to preserve a way of life that was contingent upon their identity and significance, so much so that we had evangelicals that I love and respected who's told me when I first became a follower of Christ that Bill Clinton was Satan's spawn. And then you vote for a man and defend a man who would make Bill Clinton look like a choir boy. And so all of a sudden, a president's personal life mattered when they were a Democrat, but didn't matter when they were Republican. I watched the Republican Party shift when Donald Trump came to office from the party of morals, the party of family values, the party of so-called spirituality, Christianity, to a party of power. And I'm going to tell you what's on my mind, and I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight other people. I'm going to demean them. Whatever happened to, we want examples that our children can follow. Here's what happened. Is we discovered that discipleship was very, very shallow. And as a result of that, nature hates a vacuum, and political idolatry has filled that vacuum. And so during these last few years, our church has grown by leaps and bounds. There are unbelievers going, okay, that's the Jesus I want. But then we find a lot of believers saying, I don't want progressive politics. I don't want MAGA politics. I want the kingdom of God to equip me to vote my conscience without viewing whoever wins or loses salvifically. For those of you who are interested, I did a message called Turn from Political Idolatry to Kingdom Politics. And some have said it's the best that they've ever heard. But I really want to challenge those idols, Skye, because it's killing the church.
Right. Absolutely. And going back to the original premise of the article that we started with, it's interesting that in the civil rights movement, you saw a large group of Christians, largely Christians, actively participating in the way of God's kingdom, obeying the commands of Jesus, and yet they were rejected by a lot of white evangelicalism as illegitimate. And now we see a movement, the MAGA movement, which is actively hostile to the teachings of Jesus. And yet a bunch of white evangelicals are going, no, this is really Christian. This is truly of God. And it's just really ridiculously backwards. We're about out of time, but I want two things. Number one, if you want to read Derwin's article, we're going to post it in the show notes. It's called Why Isn't the Civil Rights Movement Considered a Revival Movement? And then secondly, you're going to stick around for a few minutes because you recently traveled to Norway, which, believe it or not, my grandfather was part Norwegian. So this is kind of my home territory in part. You went to Norway and you wrote about your experience there and the diversity of the church, which exists in a historically very non-diverse place. So we're going to talk about that in a bonus segment exclusively for Holy Post supporters. So you can go to the Holy Post website.com, holypost.com, and click the Support Us button, get access to all this great bonus material. Derwin, thank you for your wisdom and insights. And even though you've been sitting on some of these questions for decades, I'm really glad that you're expressing them now and sharing them both with your church and all of us through your writing. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, my friend.
The Holy Post Podcast is a production of Holy Post Media. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele, and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much more.